So what's our natural human diet then? What is it that is going on? What is it that we're supposed to eat? Let's look at the blue zones. Let's look at what is often touted as being the most long-lived regions of the world in the blue zones. Now, most carnivores will tell you that this has been debunked, that it's a false thing. A lot of the vegans will tell you the blue zones show that we should be plant-based, and they negate to show that every one of these societies actually does eat meat, and they supplement their diet with meat. So let's just look at the blue zones for a second. Let's see if we can find any videos on the blue zones. So if we have a look at the blue zones, and just look at the blue zone maps, it says here, what are the 5 blue zones in the world? So Okinawa in Japan, Sardinia in Italy, Nicoya in Costa Rica, Icaria in Greece, Loma Linda in California. So these different places across the world seem to have the longest lived people. A lot of them, when you actually go visit in these regions, let's see if we can open up this map there. We actually go and visit these regions. A lot of the plant-based people will tell you that these people eat plant-based. They're eating plant-based. This is why they're living such a long life. Well, every single case you'll find a sort of a confirmation bias. So if a plant-based person is looking at the blue zones, they'll say, oh, as you can see, they're eating a lot of legumes, they're eating a lot of starches, sweet potatoes, they're eating a lot of vegetables and fruit, and this is why they're living so long. And then you'll get the animal-based people saying, oh, well, actually in Sardinia, these people are living off pork. They've got a lot of pork, they mostly eat pork, they hardly eat vegetables. So what is the truth? What is the actual truth with these people? Well, the reality is it's somewhere in between. It's somewhere in between all of these regions. You can look at just a basic Japanese diet, not just an Okinawans, but a basic Japanese diet. You've got a lot of rice. There's a lot of rice being eaten at every meal. Traditionally, most East Asian countries will have rice as the predominant starch in their meals, sometimes sweet potatoes, but mostly rice. But it is supplemented by seafood and meat. They are able to adapt. They will have some pickled vegetables of some kind, sometimes normal vegetables, and then they'll have little bits of meat, and it would be mostly vegetable based with the supplement of meat. So it's relatively low in fat for most of these regions. It's usually a delicacy to have lots of fat in your diet. King Henry VIII didn't get fat on eating lots of sugar. He got fat on eating lots of fat, a lot of fatty meat. Right? He was wealthy. He was the king. He had an abundance of foods that would have been slathered in fatty, would have been fried and lots of sugar with the fat. And he wasn't getting fat from eating lots of fruit. Okay. He wasn't getting fat from eating lots of vegetables. He was getting fat from eating a lot of fatty meat. And that showed your wealth. If you could afford that meat, if you could afford that fatty meal, you would get fat. And that's why a rounder figure was associated with abundance. But for the most part, the human race in modern times and also in not so distant past, maybe in the last several thousand years when agriculture first came about, most people were subsisting off a predominant carbohydrate-rich diet with the supplementation of meat, a little bit of fish that they could catch and a little bit of meat. In extreme conditions, when there was a lot of snow and vegetation wasn't growing, then they would subsist off meat that was preserved or pickled, salted and brined. That's what they would eat. But they would always gather fruit and preserve fruit and have that in abundance in storage, and they would eat that. In my country where I'm from, my ancestors from Lebanon would have eaten during the harsh winters. They would have had preserved fruits. They would have had figs, dates. They would have had some preserved apricots and things like that, and they would have had canned things as well. We would have also had, in Lebanon traditionally, they would have had a lot of wheat, cracked wheat, and bread, a lot of legumes, hummus. The actual word hummus actually means chickpea, and it's not in Arabic. It's actually, the origin is Phoenician. It's a Phoenician word from our ancient ancestors, the Lebanese ancient ancestors, and it means bitter, because the legume was so bitter, they knew that they had to soak the chickpeas in order to be able to consume them. They had to get rid of the phytates and the lectins and all of that before they could consume the legume. And this is what people did. They learned this over thousands of years, that there were certain things that they could eat and they couldn't eat. And unfortunately, the carnivore community is doing, these doctors are doing a disservice to the people out there that can't afford meat by telling them that vegetables and plants are bad for them. To sit there and say that they are poisonous for us is ludicrous, because it's getting to the point where, what is it that you can eat? What is it that you can eat? Because I'm going to tell you this now. If eating more of a plant-based diet that is lower in fat is going to get me to reverse my type 2 diabetes, get all the excess fat off my body, and get me moving in a healthier direction where I reduce my current risk of breast cancer, which is double the risk, and I've done the study, I've done the tests, I am currently at a double the risk of the average woman for breast cancer if I continue to go down this path. Now, what do you think is going to get me down that path? Is it just continuing to demonize vegetables and say that they're horrible for you and they're really bad and I should just eat all the fat in the world and all the protein, or lower the fat but eat lots and lots of protein that encourages cancer to grow? Tell me what it is that I am supposed to do. Do I demonize vegetables? Do I demonize fat? Or do I demonize protein? Or what do I do? Because what I have come to the conclusion of is that when you lower the fat intake, you lower the body fat on your body and you lower the insulin resistance risk. That is actually how metabolism works. Don't let these doctors who have a special agenda to push a certain product or a certain way of eating from their own bias, and they will twist studies in their own direction, tell you that eating a high-fat diet is good for you. Yes, we need a little bit of fat, but if you've got an abundance of fat on your body, you already have the fat there. Okay, you already have that fat on you. If I lower my fat on a regular basis on myself and in my diet, I reduce the risk of cancers. I reduce the risk of various ovarian cancer, of cervical cancer, of breast cancer. I reduce this fatty tissue in my body. I reduce the food that is going to feed the cancer. It's not sugar that is going to feed the cancer. It is a poor diet that feeds cancer. It is an overabundance of protein that feeds the cancers. So I need you to have a think and rethink on what it is that you are eating, what it is you've been told that is you're allowing to confuse you. So much so that you're just turning to whatever. You just decide, oh, I'm just going to eat whatever because everybody's confusing me. No, the one thing we can all agree on is whole foods will get you healthier, but lower fat whole foods will get you there quicker. I'm going to tell you that now. And unless you have a chronic condition such as epilepsy or Alzheimer's, eating higher fat in your diet is not going to be conducive to losing body fat and reversing a risk of any disease. I can't tell you enough how much confusion has come in my life, and I really worry about my friends because they must, and my husband, they're so sick of hearing me just talk a bit in circles about this works this week and this works that week, and testing these things, biohacking myself to try and work out what it is that is going to help me reverse the malady of the Western diet and the diet culture, just chronic dieting. I will tell you this. So in my recent sort of experiments on myself, what I decided to do after a couple of months of really strict, and I'm talking super strict, keto dieting, where I was counting every single bit of food that went in my mouth. I meal prepped. I ate really low fat, and that's not, that got me into ketogenesis. I'll tell you that right now, okay? Because if you lower your calorie intake and your fat intake, you are going to go into ketosis. It's not dependent on the high fat. But I met my protein goals. I made sure I was eating over 100 grams of protein every day, and I had really low fat, really low carbs, and I did that for 2 months. And I honestly got sick of meat. I was just so sick of meat. I got really fed up with eating chicken breast, and I got really fed up with just eating so many eggs and egg whites, and I wanted vegetables. I just wanted some fruit and vegetables. And I was not a big fruit eater because it was demonized. I had type 2 diabetes. I kept telling my husband, stop buying fruit juice. Not good for you. I've got type 2 diabetes. You can have it, but I can't have it. I've got a terrible metabolism. This is what I told myself, and I told my husband. And I was relying on caffeine. And this is another thing that happens with a lot of carnivore people. I don't know if any of you are doing the carnivore diet, but I could tell you most people, and you'll see most of the doctors talking about this, they're all on bloody coffee because they got zero energy. They've got no carbs coming in. They're relying on the fat to be utilized for energy. They're relying on gluconeogenesis, which is where the body makes its own glucose because it needs the glucose, making it from the protein that they're eating. Okay, they're relying on the body to do. They're basically stressing their body to the point of an extreme situation. You're mimicking a famine. You're mimicking an ice age. You're mimicking an environment that has no vegetables. Your body will survive and it will thrive because it's coming off a Western diet. But you're mimicking what it's like to be in an ice age where only meat is available to you. So your body will do what it needs to do. But I'm going to tell you what it also does. When you're in a famine state and all you've got to eat is meat and the fat that is coming from the animals that you're slaughtering or hunting, your body will be insulin resistant. Okay. Now, while you test your blood sugars, and yes, your fasting blood sugar will drop. It will show that the insulin is not making a big blip. They will tell you that insulin elevation is what's going to cause you to be no longer insulin resistant. So we're sort of got to switch off this natural hormone that needs to raise and do all these other good things for us, transport energy to our cells. We're trying to tell that to stop working because you're insulin resistant and your fat cells are full of fat. Your cells are full of fat. Your cells are full of fat, making you insulin resistant, clogged up, can't take in energy, can't hear the insulin. So the sugar is just being rejected and floating in your bloodstream. And you want to say that that's the answer to reversing insulin resistance? Wouldn't the answer be to make your cells more sensitive to glucose? Wouldn't it be beneficial to behave as though your body is in abundance of receiving glucose and having the energy and training your body to be able to tolerate that glucose in the absence of fat? Maybe that's what we need to do. Maybe that's what we need to do. Maybe we need to train our bodies to be in that abundant Garden of Eden diet. Maybe we need to do that. Maybe we need to tell our body it's okay, calm down, reduce that cortisol. Because ever since I craved that fruit and I decided, I'm like, you know what would happen if I just had the fruit? Now, I already knew that fruit and fat together was a big no-no. I already knew that from my Dr. McDougall starch solution days, that when you combine fat with sugar, whether it's natural or unnatural. That's a big no-no, right? It's not good. It causes insulin resistance, but so does any kind of high fat. And calorie restriction also causes insulin resistance. Okay, you see what I'm getting at here? Calorie restriction, starvation. It was a no-brainer. Of course, I was going to be type 2 diabetic by the time I hit menopause. Estrogen tanked. Visceral fat went up. Of course, I was going to get that. Okay, and already, I was starving myself. Wasn't eating. I was surviving on coffee. I wasn't sleeping. Insulin resistance through the roof. Okay. So how about instead of telling our bodies that we're in a famine, we actually feed it? So what I did was I did an experiment, tested my blood in the morning. Now, by the way, my blood sugars only were getting better when I was doing ketogenic, super, super low carb, barely any calories, and on double the dose of what I was prescribed for. So I was taking metformin as well as berberine. Okay, so I was trying to force the body to react to insulin properly and to be less insulin resistant, and only then the blood sugar was starting to be in the normal range. Okay, plus fasting. Okay, so then I go, right, I'm going to just try fruit. I'm going to try and eat fruit and see what happens, because no one gets fat on just fruit. You only get fat when you have fruit with fat, right? So I thought, I'm just going to test this. I had this theory that cortisol was high. My morning bloods were high because of high cortisol. I had chronic high cortisol from all the stress. And I noticed that depending on how close to bedtime I ate, blood sugar might be really high. Now, in the ketogenic diet, I had really high morning blood sugars at times. This is with a ketogenic, high fat, sometimes even carnivore diet. It was still high in the morning. I didn't know what I was doing wrong. I was having coffee. Sometimes I'd have black coffee. Sometimes I would add heavy cream. So there you go, full fat. I was avoiding all sugar. Okay, as long as I could have fat, I was having all the fat up the wazoo, but I was avoiding sugar. Well, this time switched it right out. I thought, I'm going to stop. I'm just going to have fruit when I wake up. Now, you're talking about years of not eating breakfast. Within 30 minutes of waking up, so I hydrate myself, take my morning blood sugars. It's in a diabetic range, okay, so over 6.0. You might have to do the math on that for the American way of reading blood sugars. It was over 6.0, and then I would have some fruit, and I would have really hydrating fruit, so not bananas. I would have something really watery, hydrating fruit, as much fruit as I wanted. Measure my blood sugar 2 hours later, and this is, by the way, I'd forgotten to take my medication. Forgotten to take it. Blood sugar's in the normal range 2 hours later. And it didn't just happen once. It happened every single time. Blood sugar's in the normal range 2 hours post-meal. What does that tell you? Sugar is not the enemy. Sugar in the absence of fat gets you lean. Sugar in the absence of fat gets you lean. That when I did a really strict keto diet, I was not getting blood sugar readings that good after a meal. There was still fat in that chicken I was eating, or the eggs, or whatever. I was not getting the readings I was getting just with the fruit. Okay, so this started getting me thinking. I recalled when I was following the starch solution, Dr. McDougall's diet, who passed away recently, by the way. And I remembered him talking about the rice diet, Dr. Walter Kempner's rice diet, which was started in the 1940s and was at the Duke University in, I think it was North Carolina. And let me just show you some of the pictures from the people at the rice clinic. Now, when I say rice diet, it wasn't just rice. So the first stage of this rice diet, this was a German who's the German or Austrian doctor who escaped, Nazi Germany, and was brought to America, or he came to America, and he was a very talented physician. And he wanted, at the time, they didn't have any medication, any solution for really malignant hypertension. It was death. It was, people would die of heart attacks or strokes from hypertension. They didn't have medication at the time. They didn't have a lot of medication for a lot of these illnesses. And he wanted to formulate a way of eating in the clinic, in the hospital, so that he could get people's blood pressure down. So he formulated the understanding that and he based this on basic nutrition, basic understanding of the metabolism of the human body, that the human body requires glucose. It requires glucose. Now, a lot of carnivore doctors will tell you and say, and they repeat this over and over and over again, well, you need essential fatty acids and essential amino acids, but carbohydrates are not essential. That's wrong. They are essential. Our body runs on carbohydrates. It runs on glucose, and it will make glucose if you don't give it glucose in the form of what you're eating. It has to go through a process to make the glucose to run the human body. That's how it operates, okay? That's a basic fact. It is a fact. So Dr. Walter Kempner formulated this diet for these people, and they were not overweight. They were just ordinary people who, some of them were suffering from diabetes and they were going blind. Some people couldn't walk. They had all these chronic conditions, kidney issues, hypertension, malignant hypertension. They were coming from all over America to come and see him. And the first stage of the rice diet was fruit. So it was 3 meals a day. You would have fruit for breakfast. Your second meal was a cup of rice, and it was just white rice. White rice, no sodium, no fat. So no overt fats, no added sodium. White rice and some fruit and rice for dinner. And he would even add table sugar, okay, table sugar, ordinary white sugar, to some people's programs. And there was also fruit juice as well for some people. If they were very lean, he would add sugar to bump up the calories for them so that they wouldn't lose too much weight. And it was astonishing. There were people getting cured of type 2 diabetes, getting cured of their chronic debilitating diseases on a very high carbohydrate, very low fat, very low protein, very low sodium diet. What do they tell you to eat when you are doing carnivore? It's the exact opposite. Bump up your sodium, have lots of salt, eat lots of fat, have some protein. Sometimes they might say, have the leaner cuts of meat sometimes, but they would always tell you to have your ruminant meat, which is the red meat, over having chicken or fish. They would say mostly have red meat, okay? It's a total opposite of what this doctor is telling his patients to do. And these people were achieving stunning results. I'm going to show you what ended up happening. It wasn't a weight loss protocol. It was not a weight loss protocol. By the way, it was a whole food diet. It wasn't plant-based. A lot of plant-based people will tell you that the rice diet was a plant-based diet. It is not a plant-based diet, but it mimics what these people in the blue zones kind of do, with the exception of adding a bit of olive oil here and there. The rice diet was a stage-by-stage diet where the basis was starch and some fruit, and gradually, as you went down these different phases, you would actually add different ingredients to test them. It was almost like an elimination diet. You would start to add tomatoes, onions, some peppers. Then you would add some different other vegetables, some lower calorie density vegetables to your meal. So you would have a certain component. There was always a quality of whole foods, keep it simple, whole vegetables. And then eventually when you got to the end, you were allowed to have one egg every week, and you were allowed to have some meat, lean meat. It was always lean. Okay. He knew to keep the fat low, to not have these overt fats. He would say that they could use certain non-stick sort of ways of cooking and stuff. And it was still also there was a calorie restriction there, but I guess, if you had a bit more, you would still get benefits. If you had a bit more to eat, you would still get the benefits because it's a whole food diet. But it's not a purely vegan diet. You have this supplementary animal product coming in with an abundance of fruit and vegetables and some starches. Pretty simple. No dairy. No dairy. That was the key. And that's something I've been following, is no dairy. And I definitely noticed a great reduction in just breathing and inflammation gone down. My CRP scores went down, no inflammation. A lot of things improved in my blood tests, by the way. So everything was really good. Liver functions reduce, coming down, measurements coming down. So let's have a look at the Walter Kempener's rice diet. Now, I knew about this and I thought, I want to test this. I want to test it on myself. Let's see what happens. Okay. So let me find it for you. And let me show you. So this is Dr. Walter Kempener right here. He lived to about the age of 94, and he pretty much, he didn't necessarily have to follow this protocol because he was in good shape. But witnesses who were there, one lady who wrote a book documenting the diet, she was allowed to write it, Judy Moskowitz. She reported that he would always weigh himself, and if his weight went up a pound or two, he would fast for the day. So he had that kind of regimen where he was really watching what he was eating. And I gather, he lived a very long life, but he did follow this kind of principle of a lower fat diet where, things were in moderation, but there was an abundance of fruit and vegetables eaten in the diet. I want to show you these results here. We've got what was happening. Now, this was 1960s, these photographs, 1960s. People were not necessarily obese. It wasn't a well-known thing for people to be obese like it is now in these days. So these people, even in terms of obesity, are not as bad as what you see these days, right? But this is the 1960s, and this is a woman before and after following the rice diet at the clinic. So they would actually go in. Now, this is what I wanted to show you, this one here. This is incredible. Check this girl out. Now, this is in the space of something like 6 months. These people were eating pure carbohydrates, no overt fats, no protein, only protein in rice. There is protein in rice, by the way. If you eat sufficient amount of calories, you can get protein from these grains and these fruits, and everything's got protein in it. So they had enough. And don't forget, like when somebody is obese, like this man here, this gentleman here, he's got an abundance of protein in his body. Okay, protein is not just muscle; it's skin, it's tissue, it's all of this. And if we were to do a DEXA scan on a very obese person, when you lose weight, it counts fluid and muscle tissue as protein. It counts fat as separate to the fluid and muscle. And so when you lose weight, they say, oh, you lost some muscle. No, you didn't lose muscle. You lost the fluid, all that fluid that was being held in the fat cells along with your body fat, right? So that's what happened when you lost the weight. It's not losing muscle tissue. I can assure you, we've got an abundance of protein in our body when we are really overweight and obese. We're not suffering from a lack in this society. We're suffering from an overabundance of food. We're suffering from an overabundance of nutrition. This, this idea that we're chronically lacking in nutrients and nutrient density and things like that. Yeah, okay, if you're eating just a very poor processed diet, but most of us are not just eating processed foods. We're eating other things as well. And while the soil is not as vibrant and as nutritious as it should be to grow our food, we're talking about most people are not suffering from lack. They're suffering from too much, an abundance of food and nutrition. So I wanted to show you, I'll just share that again. And yeah, so this young lady, I'm going to have a look at her. I would say I'm going to guess her weight. I mean, depending on her height there, she might be about 110 kilograms. I'm pretty good at guessing people's weights. 110 kilograms. Let's say she's 5'4". Maybe she's about 110, 120 kilograms. And look at her here. I would say 50 kilograms here. 50, that's about 100 pounds, 110 pounds. I mean, that's a huge drop, right? She's halved her body weight right there. There's more. There's this man. He's from more modern times, 2011 to 2013. Now, I listened to the doctor who studied with Dr. Walter Kempner, because Dr. Walter Kempner is no longer with us. I listened to an interview of the doctor who knew this man, this gentleman here. And he was, this is a guy who he tried the RAS diet before, didn't stick to it. And I think he came back, he was very obese, and he was really poor health, was about, death's door with a heart attack and possible hypertension, really severe hypertension. Started the rice diet protocol, lives on it, and he's gotten down to a good weight. Apparently the doctor said he could stand to lose a little bit more of the visceral fat there, but he was happy following this protocol, and he still lives it today. He still follows this protocol today. It's all very interesting. You can learn about it a bit more, and I just think it turns everything on its head. When you talk to carnivores about this diet, and I know this young lady here, we've become friends. So this is Dr. McDougall and Chef AJ, two very well-known plant-based. Dr. McDougall is no longer with us. Chef AJ, low fat, no salt, no sugar, no oil. She follows plant-based diet. This is Lois, I believe this is Lois. Yeah, Lois Anna. So I actually know this young lady. I've just become friends with her recently. We've just been talking. And talking about the rice diet to heal various conditions. Now, carnivores will tell you that if you talk about the rice diet, they'll say, oh, well, it was a clinical setting and they were just eating low calorie. Of course, they're going to lose weight. Well, it's not just weight that they were losing. You're talking about reversing type 2 diabetes with glucose. Reversing type 2 diabetes with glucose in the absence of fat. Why? Because the cells are overloaded. So when you have insulin resistance, your cells are stuffed full of fat. You can be lean and skinny fat, okay, meaning you've got a lot of visceral fat, and your cells are insulin resistant. They're starting to become insulin resistant. It may not show on your blood sugars yet, but the operation in your body is not occurring at the way it should. Do you know that you can, basically with Alzheimer's disease, that's insulin resistance of the brain. When you're insulin resistant, you can be insulin resistant in the lungs. The cells in your lungs can be insulin resistant, meaning that it's impaired. The operation of breathing is impaired because the cells in your lungs are resistant to insulin, to any energy coming in to drive what it's supposed to do. So we're in a world now that is mostly insulin resistant. Most people are suffering from insulin resistance, and insulin resistance can occur in childhood without the child appearing to have any weight problem. This is a long-standing issue, and I think the operation and the fuel that we're supposed to be eating, we're told that we're supposed to be running on stimulants and, all these carnivore and keto people. I'm sorry, but there's a lot of them just living off their caffeine because they're dying for energy. And I could tell you, since having the fruit, I have no caffeine. I did not feel any withdrawal. I did not get any energy dip. I think it was like one day when my body switched from fat burning to sugar burning, or whatever it was burning, it switched over into using glucose as a fuel. I was one day where I felt a bit tired, and then I just had energy to burn. I was able, the whole time I was doing the really low carb program, I didn't have energy to go out on a long walk. I couldn't even get myself up off the couch to I was out, walking around the house, but I was not able to get up and go for a long walk. I'm walking my dog twice a day now. I'm out. I want to move. I noticed that when I have the fuel, the fuel that I told myself I couldn't utilize, that my body somehow couldn't utilize carbohydrates, I'm now having this fruit, whole foods, and it's dropping my blood sugar. It's keeping it low. And then it will spike, which is what it's supposed to do, people. You're supposed to have a blood sugar spike when you eat carbohydrates. It's insulin is doing what it's supposed to do, and then it's supposed to drop and go into normal levels. That's what it's supposed to do. That's a good insulin response. It's just not good to have it up here along with fat, because that's just increased insulin resistance. So high fat deprivation of food, high fat and sugar causes insulin resistance. And the deprivation, the lack of eating, the extensive fasting, the living on caffeine, the not enough calories, all of it is what people are trying to emulate these days. It's all creating more insulin resistance. So if you want to reverse type 2 diabetes and insulin resistance, you've got to drop the fat. You have to drop the fat, and you have to eat enough calories to sustain you. You have to have enough calories from glucose sources, from carbohydrates. And if I'm going to follow someone, I'm not going to follow a semi-fat doctor. I'm going to follow people who are lean. I'm going to follow people who have worked with clients that are lean. I'm going to follow people that are living the lifestyle and showing us how to live. Interestingly enough, what I wanted to show you, one of the other people who kind of got me thinking after I started thinking about the rice diet was Cole Robinson from the Snake Diet. I don't know if some of you follow him. I love him. I know when I first watched him, I used to go, he's swearing, he's, cussing people out, but it's an act. He's trying to be like a drill sergeant. Cole Robinson of the Snake Diet. This is him. So you might have heard of snake juice. Snake juice is, Cole's been around for 15 years on, maybe 10, 15 years on YouTube. Really had always been pushing electrolytes and was testing things on himself as a trainer and, doing weightlifting and he was a trainer in a gym, personal trainer. And he was testing things on himself and then doing this drill sergeant kind of thing where he would biohack himself with different eating modalities to help his clients. And that's what I want to see. I want to see someone who's testing things on themselves. Instead of me taking everything at face value of what Dr. Ken Berry says or what Freely the Banana Girl says or whatever, I'm going to test it on myself. I'm going to test it with measurable results. I'm going to see if that thing works before I invest in that thing and before I repeat that to other people. It's fine to understand things intellectually that make sense. And when somebody says a doctor says, I've read this study, and you just believe it at face value that study, which is saying that sugar is bad for you, when you look deeper into the study, you see that the sugar was accompanied with a normal Western diet, which was high in fat. And these people who are now telling us, people like Freely the Banana Girl, Durian Rider, other really lean, high carb, low fat vegans and plant-based people are showing us that you can get ripped as long as the fat is super, super low. And we've been having all of these doctors coming in and telling us, oh, you must eat fat. You need the fat for your brain. You need the fat for your skin. You need this. You need, hang on a second, wait a second, wait a second. So if most of us are overweight to obese, I think we've got an abundance of fat right here. And they're not saying have zero fat all the time. It's that if you don't want to have fat on your body, you don't eat the fat. And if you're going to have it, you don't have it in huge amounts, maybe 30 grams a day, 30 to 60 grams maximum, depending on how lean you are. That's enough, even 15 to 20 grams of fat a day, that's enough for your body to do what it needs to do, to have the functions it needs to have, right? And to create, tell me, I mean, if you're having mostly plant-based whole foods, not oils, whole food sources where the fat is not overt, it's coming through what you're eating. It's already existing in the food. And you're going to switch that out and tell me that a person who's eating fried foods or oil, canola oil in their bread and all these trans fatty acids and all these other overt fats that they're eating, the olive oil, the drizzling, or the whatever, the mayonnaise or even the saturated fat in the meat, you want to tell me that that's better than, you know what I'm saying? I don't know. So this is Cole Robinson's Snake Diet. He's recently had Mark Bell, is it Mark Bell? Mark Bell, famous athlete. He's convinced Mark Bell, who was really full on keto, to try this, to try the fruit, to try a little bit of carbs. And he's noticing energy's up. They're burning more fat. It's pretty amazing how it all works. But yeah, Cole Robinson used to promote, a keto fasting lifestyle where people were fasting for days on end. And now he's coming out, and this is what's the controversy. He's coming out and saying it doesn't work. It doesn't work. This deprivation doesn't work. He's trying the sugar. He's getting more ripped than he ever has in all the history of his channel that you see. Because Cole was always like a little fat unit, he was a bit of a chunky guy, muscly, chunky. He shows you, he'll make himself fat for a little period of time, and then he'll do a cut, and he'll show you what he's doing. He'll scream it at you. But let's just have a look at his channel. But I've been listening to some of his videos recently, and he's making sense. He's talking about that sugar in the absence of fat gets you ripped. Sugar in the absence of fat gets you ripped. I want you to have a think about all of the really lean people in your life, the really, really, really thin people who they're like got a six pack and they don't try very hard. All the really thin people I know, they live on sugar. Like they're always eating sugar in the morning. I noticed my husband is one of them. And every time he would be really busy at work and be running around all day, he'd come home and he'd have a juice. He'd just have juice. I'm like, why are you drinking juice? It's really bad for you. He'd say it gives me energy. And that's what he'd be drinking. He's drinking the juice. He's drinking juice, or he's having sugar. He's having candy. And I'm like, how is he so skinny? Because he wasn't overeating the fat. They would eat sugar all day, and then they'd have a normal dinner at night, and they'd know when to stop eating. Every skinny person I know does this. Every skinny person I know does this. I used to work with a girl, tiny little girl. She was probably, I don't know, 80 pounds. No kidding. Probably about 35 kilograms. She was a little, a young lady from, was it Laos or Cambodia? And she so thin. And she would just eat candy all day, not eat normal. She would not eat food. She would just eat candy. She's like got the sugar going, and she had full of energy, skinny as. If I, and I would say, oh, if I eat that, I'd get fat. No, it was the fact that I was eating starches and fat together in the same meal. That's what I grew up on. I grew up on, you'd have rice and you'd have a meat dish with it and lots of fat, and that's what I grew up on. So have a think about these things that I'm telling you. I mean, it's pretty remarkable what's going on right now. If you follow any kind of weight loss scene, you'll see that a lot of people are talking about this. They're talking about what Cole is saying. They're talking about how we've been lied to. I grew up in the 80s, and my first diet was when I was 7. So I would have been, what would that have been, 1983? So at the height of the aerobics, craze and the low-fat diets and everyone was saying, oh, eat cereal in the morning with a skim milk. There's always skim milk, always a grapefruit in there somewhere and a skim milk. Now, I'm not talking about that kind of restrictive diet where they're eating margarine instead of butter, and they're having like really, really low 1,000 calorie diet, 1,200 calories. I'm not talking about that kind of a diet. I'm talking about you getting your sustenance from your food, from whole foods, watching the kinds of fat you're putting in your diet. You're not adding like all this butter, you're not adding all this, you're not having any kind of carbohydrates, your fruit, you're not having it with a fatty diet. You're making sure your needs are met with the nutrition that you're eating. And apparently when you do that enough and you get the energy to go for your walks and live your life, you will get ripped. It's as simple as that, and you'll reverse a lot of these issues. So I don't know, have a think about it. Tell me what you think. I'm not saying one way or another, but I'm testing this on myself. You've got to be consistent though. Okay. So like if I notice that if I have too much salt, so I've got to cut the salt back. So if you're going to have high carb, you've got to cut down the salt. But I've been testing, the rice diet. It works, man. It works. You lose the weight. And people say, oh, but you'll lose muscle. You won't lose muscle. You've got so much muscle. If you've got a weight problem, you've got muscle. Okay. There's no history of protein deficiency in the Western world. You don't have that. That's only when you're not eating enough calories. Okay. So you got to have the calories. You got to have enough calories. You got to make sure you have enough calories. Have the fruit. Cole's telling people if you've really got a weight problem to just have fruit juice, like just try a juice diet. Try that for a while. You'll get, but it's pretty amazing. You get more insulin sensitive. And if you want to learn more about it, there is a book that you can get, and I just got to remember what it's called. This is called Advanced Nutrition and Human Metabolism. This is what they're studying in universities. This shows the basic fundamentals of how the human metabolism works, and you will see for yourself and get rid of all of that false doctrine that some doctors are peddling for you of how our metabolism works, how the body switches into gear and utilizes glucose. What does it need to be able to run effectively and fuel you? Every single metabolic action in the body needs to be fueled by glucose, and the body has to obtain that glucose from somewhere. I'm not saying that people aren't getting results with a carnivore diet or a keto diet. I'm not saying that people aren't getting results with higher fat, because I see it myself with my audience members. Got someone in my audience who started carnivore on my suggestion. She started upping the fat and she's got heaps of fat. She dropped weight, okay? But what this book will show you, what it will show you is that that's a very extreme situation, that God has created our bodies in such a way that it can handle extreme situations. And when you have certain things in place, yes, it will get you a result. Yes, it will get you into a calorie deficit because you're not, or in a fat loss because but you might still be under great stress for it to do that thing. So extreme calorie deficit, deprivation of carbs and glucose could result in weight loss, but it will, in the long term, cause insulin resistance. And don't forget, insulin resistance can still occur when you're lean on the outside. Okay, it's the fact that your cells aren't firing the way they should because they don't have that fire. Okay, fat burns in the fire of carbohydrates. Fat burns in the fire of carbohydrates. You need the carbs to fuel the mechanism for the fat to be burned in the first place. The fat on the body, I mean, not just the fat you are eating. So Dr. McDougall used to say, you know, the fat you eat is the fat you wear. And what most of the keto and carnivore doctors are doing are trying to flip that on its head and say, oh, no, that's not true. No, you burn the fat. Oh, you eat more fat, you need it. And I'm going to tell you from my own experience, that's bullshit. I'm sorry. It's a load of rubbish. Where do you think the fat goes? You're eating a pound of butter or half a stick of butter. Where's that going? Where's it going? You think all of that is needed to make your cells? You think all of that's needed to make nice skin? I don't know. Just take it from a fatty who's been through the ringer and tested things on myself. I'm just going to say, if you're eating copious amounts of fat, where do you think that's going? What's it clogging up? It might not show in your subcutaneous fat, but it might be visceral fat that's I don't know. I know it's getting you more insulin resistant, and that's what this book will tell you. It's making you more insulin resistant, okay? So if you're interested in learning about, test these things on yourself. I'm not saying don't do carnivore diet. I'm just saying watch the fat intake, okay? Let's just have a quick look, because I'm taking long enough. Yep, there we go. So the Rice Diet Report, I got it on Audible. This lady, Judy Moskovitz, is the author. Back in the 80s, I mean, she was very candid. I saw her on Chef AJ being interviewed, and she's not following this anymore. She's following a lower carb diet. Actually, she's following what I think was the diet that only worked for me back in the day, early 2000s, when I lost a lot of weight, which was a moderate carb restriction, still eating carbs, still eating fruits and vegetables and things like that, but just no starches and a lean meat. And she's doing that now, but she says very clearly, she said this works. She lost a heck ton of weight back in the early 80s when she went to the Rice Clinic under Dr. Walter Kempner. She became friends with Dr. Walter Kempner, worked at the clinic after she lost her weight. She lost this weight in something like, I think she said 8 months. It was a huge amount of weight. It was something like 130 pounds, 140 pounds. Got very lean. There are some, let's have a look. So she shows some of her, she met Oprah Winfrey back in the day. She was on the circuit. Phil Donahue. And this is her. She lost a hectare. Look. Gene Simmons, Richard Simmons, what's his name? Gene Simmons. She was, she got really lean doing the rice diet. And she says it works. But, she had a blowout. She had issues going on in her family. It's a whole story, but it works. And she very clearly says it works, but now she's decided that she wants to do this other diet. But she says whenever she needs to drop some weight, she follows the protocols of what she learned. But it's clear you don't mix carbs with fat. And I think that what's happening is a lot of people, so back in the 80s, she was desperate. A lot of overeating, and I mean, she's a very old lady. She's probably about 80 years old now, I think. But that's her now, very lean. Here's some of the other people I showed you before and after eating just fruit, rice, sugar. Can you believe it? Can you believe it? Fruit, rice, and sugar. So that's you'll find her. Her name's Judy Moskovitz. Look up the Rice Diet. You'll find it. You'll find it on Audible and Amazon. We've also got, I think that I just wanted to see if I could find one of the magazines she was in. Oh, it shows, if you go on her page, judymoskovitz.com, you'll find these. It'll actually show you an outline of what they're eating. It's it's a very low calorie diet. You don't want to be on that for very long. Okay, if you want to eat more, you're still going to lose weight. It's a very low calorie diet. And it's not from the low calorie. I think it's the combination. I think it's the low sodium, and it's a lot of other things. I just want to show you really quickly if I can find it. There she is. Look how lean. I mean, I don't know. And don't forget, they were being monitored They'd go move out to North Carolina. They'd go find accommodation, and then they'd go to the rice clinic, the rice houses, and they'd eat their meals together with the rice and the fruit initially, and then they'd slowly add different things over the weeks, and they would all stick to it. And sometimes they'd have blowouts, and because they didn't have to be there, but they paid money to be there, and they were losing the weight, and they were eating in abundance. And I can tell you, I'm telling you, I tested this on myself. How does someone who kept telling herself that I can't eat carbs because carbs make you fat, how does my weight go down? How does my blood sugar go down? How does that happen? How do I have more energy doing this than having no carbs and fasting and having to survive on coffee? Because carbs in the absence of fat gets you ripped. Carbs in the absence of fat gets you ripped. Now, I'm not promoting fruitarianism. I'm not promoting that. I'm not promoting even veganism. Okay. I think every now and then you want to have some fish, but just if you need to lose the weight, have a look at fruit. Have a look at fruit and see what that can do for you. See what it can do for you. I know there's a lot more I can talk about. The Rice Diet Report is one of the books, Advanced Nutrition and Human. Anyway, rewind if you need to find out what books I was sharing with you. It's getting dark outside. I've just decided I'm just going to start recording in whatever. My daughter's inside. She's preoccupied. School holidays now, so I could just use my computer, and I'm just going to record. I'm just going to record reaction videos. If there's something you want me to talk about or react to, I will. I've got a lot of viewpoints on a lot of things. This has gone a really long time. I don't even know how long I've been recording. Listen, guys, this is a really contentious issue, and your health is in dire circumstances if you are just listening to every schmuck that's coming along. Okay, you've got to test things for yourself. You've got to try things out for yourself. You've got to have measurable things to show and prove to yourself. But you've also got to understand, how does human metabolism work? Don't just get fooled by people saying, oh, well, this study says and that study says. There are things that you can use. Now, I am determined to not use any pharmaceuticals to lose the weight. I'm not going to do the Ozempics, the semaglutides. I'm not going to do that. I just think it's too dangerous. This is about health. This is about gaining health. This is about gaining energy. This is about being able to reverse risk factors. We spend all that time trying to reject the you-know-whats, but what are you doing about what you're eating? There's so much confusion out there, right? And here's another thing I want to say. This is what was bothering me with, convincing myself that I have to be carnivore for the rest of my life because that's the proper human diet. And I just don't believe it's the proper human diet. I think it's a sometimes diet. I think that sometimes in certain circumstances, if there was an ice age, humans can survive on that and thrive on it, right? But the body is under stress when it does that. I think if we lived on tropical islands, hey, eat some fish and some coconuts or whatever, maybe that's a proper human diet. Maybe the proper human diet is what the indigenous people had. Or were they starving? What about the Maasai? It depends on the environment you're in. And God, in his infinite wisdom, created our bodies to be able to survive all these different environments. Do you get it? But the current food environment is not good. And you need to pick and choose. And the current state of human bodies it's never been like this. We've never, ever had this kind of epidemic of insulin resistance and obesity. We've never had this. And to be overloaded with information at the same time and still suffer from this, the confusion that is going on out there in every piece of information that is out there is confusing us because we are overloaded by varying voices and we are refusing to check what we really believe by studying that thing in its entirety and checking things for ourselves, trusting our own understanding of things when we study and research the evidence for ourselves. This goes for political ideologies. This goes for religious beliefs. This goes for our diet as well. Get the information, test it on yourself, see what it is you believe, and don't be afraid to be a fence sitter. Don't be afraid to be a fence sitter, because sometimes you're not going to have all the information and the jury's going to be out. Don't be dogmatic about anything. Listen, the only absolute in the world, there's different truths, there's different points of view. The world is about free will. God created that, gave us free will. That's the whole point. Okay, we're allowed to believe what we want to believe because God gives us that free will. In his infinite wisdom, he says, you want to come to me, you come to me from your own free will. He cannot force you to do anything. And that's why this world has these extremes. That's why this world has these multiple potential realities of truth. But the only absolute is God. God is the only truth. Everything else is conjecture. I'm going to leave it there, and I think that I've made my point. And I hope this wasn't too long for you, and I hope you survived this. So one thing I was going to say is that we're often threatened with a food shortage crisis. What if things go wrong in this world and it's the end times and they restrict the food that we're going to eat? What happens? It always bothered me as a carnivore. I always kept saying, what's going to happen? Obtaining meat that's, to only eat meat and to, what if this is the only diet that I get to eat? What ends up happening there? How do I get eggs? How do I survive, without, am I going to have to eat carbs? Oh, no. And have a think about this, okay? I want you to have a think about this, that there are, in history, people didn't always survive on meat. It was not something that was common. Societies thrived on starches and supplementing their diet with bits of meat, with fish. It was only in extreme circumstances where they didn't have that. World War II rationing. If you actually look at the rationing of World War II, most of the rations were carbohydrate based to get their energy up. They were supplemented with sugar. That was a definite thing. Sweets or candies. Jam was often one of the supplemented things, or the rationed items that they could have. Most of the people grew their own fruits and vegetables if they had the space in the gardens, or they would trade. They would only get 1 egg a week, just like Walter Kempner's diet, 1 egg a week. Meat was rationed. And what ended up happening in the stats was you had people coming out of World War II in the best health ever. People were lean, people were in the best health ever, and yet they were eating an abundance of carbohydrates and, restricted or rationed fats and meats and things like that. How does that occur? How do people have the best health ever? So much so that people became very fertile and were able to, have the baby boomers that happened after World War II, right? A lot of people got pregnant and a lot of people were in the best health ever, best shape ever. And these were not obese people before and then they lost the weight. They were lean people, and then most of them lean people. And because of the rationing that lasted well into the 50s, they had the best health ever on these carbohydrates. So maybe, listen, I might end up doing a video and look up what a typical rationing diet was in World War II, a World War II ration diet, and see if I can live on the rations and how I feel after eating that high carb diet. How would I feel after eating that? There's been lots of videos done by other people and other YouTube channels following a ration diet. There's a movement of people who follow the rations of World War II under the guise that they will help just with no waste and things like that to save money as well. A lot of people are testing these things on themselves, and this is what I encourage. I think that people need to test things on themselves. Don't believe things in blind faith. Test it for yourself. You see something, test it. See if it works. Another video I'd really like to do, and what was stopping me from doing this was because I said to myself, I can't have carbohydrates, so I can't do this video, is I wanted to do a budget-friendly meal video where I show you how to live on a really strict, small budget during these times when economic times are terrible. How can you save money and cook for a family? Every time, what's going to be the cheapest options are going to be rice, beans, potatoes. These are the foods that are going to be cheap. Even fruit juice, jam. This is all cheap stuff. So what if you let go of the fat for a little while, just for a month, and test it on yourself? What would happen if you ate just a little, you cut back on the fat, you ate whole foods, and you ate 3 meals a day, just like most of our ancestors would have done, our relatives would have done, maybe 3 meals a day, and you just did that for a month? What would happen? Test it on yourself. What would happen if you just had rice and beans and some fruit and what would happen? And some vegetables. What would happen? What would happen to your budget? Is it sustainable for you to be eating ribeyes like Dr. Sean Baker every day? Big tomahawk steaks every day? Is that sustainable for you? I mean, these are the things going through my head, because if you're following a carnivore diet in this day and age with the economic strife that everybody is under, what's either going to happen is you're going to start to eat refined carnivore foods like protein powders and, these sorts of things. And you're going to struggle to meet your requirements for what you need. I don't know. Have a think about these things. Test them out for yourself. Love you all. Please check out the links below. I do have a link for something called Phix, which is a mature hops extract. I've also been taking that, and I'm telling you, the body fat, it gets rid of the visceral body fat, and you just got to take it. It has so many other benefits as well. So if you're confused about what to eat, but you're kind of working on one thing and you're not sure, take the Phix. Take Phix. It might assist the burning of the internal body fat as well with whatever it is you're choosing to do. All right, I'll leave it with you there. See you later.